Joining us on the phones, we visited with our with this last guest just about a couple of weeks ago, talking about climate change and Joe Biden's policies towards climate and also energy and how it could impact Texas in the future. And joining us to talk about the impact the energy is having right now on Texas, Jason Isaac with the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Welcome back to the show, sir. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Chad. I am warm, and fortunately for me, my electricity is on, but there are millions of Texans that don't have it on today because of bad policies that have been placed over the last decade.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about this because I think all over the U.S. people are a little bit surprised that Texas is having to deal with this right now and deal with rolling blackouts and and now it's all throughout the state, not only just on the ERCOT grid, on other grids as well. I mean, you've got threats of rolling blackouts everywhere across this state. Boil it down for us. What has gone wrong?
Well, over the last 4 years, we've lost about 3,000 megawatts of electric generation in the state of Texas, with our population skyrocketing. That's 3,000 megawatts of reliable generation. And we've gained about 20,000 megawatts of unreliable generation, wind and solar. And they were only helping a little bit last night. Today, around 8 o'clock, it's projected they'll be supplying about 2.5% of their installed capacity. And that's the problem that we have. We don't have this thermal generation, a.k.a. powered by fossil fuels or nuclear, that's growing like our population or our economy is growing. It's absolutely appalling. Fortunately, when you've got the subsidies that unreliable, we just can't keep up.
Well, okay. So, how did Texas lose this energy that was out there, the reliable energy?
Yeah, that's reliable energy. Well, you've got stuff that's just reached its end of life and hasn't been replaced with new reliable generation, and that's what's happening. And the lowest priority on the grid. And so when you're getting tax subsidies and state subsidies, wind can actually put electricity on the grid for nothing or pay consumers to take it and still be profitable. Well, natural gas and coal and nuclear can't compete with that. You can't compete with somebody paying their customers.
Yeah.
And so they're not building it. And that's what we've seen is we've seen extremely low numbers of new natural gas or coal generation come online over the last 10 years, quite honestly. And that's what's hurting the state.
So what can be done to reverse this?
Well, actually, it's something that the Texas Public Policy Foundation recommended late last year as one of our legislative action agenda items, and that is to require new electricity on the grid to be readily available, to have dispatchable electricity. So if you're going to put 100 megawatts of electricity generation on the grid, then you've got to be able to provide 80% of that, or whatever the number is, because last night, our thermal fleet was running at full tilt. That's our coal, our natural gas, and our nuclear fleet was running at full tilt. We saw some of the unreliables drop off. And what happened is you've got to keep a certain amount of load in the grid, in the electric wires. And if you don't have that load there, then you start to lose power plants. They start to get tripped and drop off. It's a mechanism that's built into the grid. And that's exactly what happened last night. Our unreliables weren't producing. We don't have enough new reliable generation, and we couldn't meet the demands last night. And so you literally had power plants drop off and not providing any electricity to the grid. When ERCOT should have caught this earlier, they should have been prepared and quite honestly started doing rolling outages, brownouts, around 1 o'clock in the morning. But they didn't, and they kind of dropped the ball on this big time. And it's unfortunate because you've still got thousands and thousands of people without electricity.
Okay, so that's the reason why then we had a listener from Wichita Falls who called in. They've been without power since 4 a.m. When ERCOT sent out these messages saying that, well, you're only going to be out of power for 10 minutes to 45 minutes, that makes people probably not too happy, but they may be a little bit more understanding about a 10 to 15 to 30-minute power outage compared to a 4 to 6 hour power outage, if not more. Is that where ERCOT dropped the ball?
Yeah, really dropped the ball about 1 a.m. last night when they saw that these numbers were happening and didn't start forcing these outages, because you're right, those outages would have been 30 minutes. But when you lose an entire plant, when it trips offline, it takes hours to come back online and recharge the lines. And that's not what happened. It's just a complete drop of the ball, at ERCOT. And so you're right. Yeah, some people have been without power since 4 a.m. when it should have just really been about 30 minutes. Imagine if they've got people at home, like I have family members at home that have breathing machines, that have a battery that'll last for a couple of hours at most. But after that, not having oxygen, imagine there's people like that in their homes right now, or people that are just suffering because their homes are down in the 40 degrees, which is the case that we've had with some neighbors here across the street from us. Yeah. Just directly across the street, no power. And we've got power here out in Dripping Springs.
Jeez. With the legislature being in session, do you think that there's a chance that lawmakers will have a little bit of a renewed focus maybe on the power grid? I mean, sometimes these things happen during the interim, and lawmakers kind of lose space of what happened. I mean, this is going to be, if lawmakers are back in their districts, they might be hearing it from some folks right now. Hey, do something about ERCOT. Do something about the grid moving forward. What do you think?
Chad, you couldn't be more right. My phone's been blowing up. I've been getting text messages and calls all day from former colleagues. I served in the House for 4 terms, and they're calling and asking me about this. It's a life-powered project of the Texas Public Policy Foundation. We've been writing about this for years, and we literally expected this same thing to happen last August, but not for the shutdowns decimating our economy. The demand for electricity was down in August. Had it not been for COVID, we would have experienced this months ago. But the thing about heat is it's much more survivable. Wintertime deaths are astronomical compared to heat-related illnesses. And I've read somewhere that for every person that dies of heat exhaustion, you'll have 17 people that will die of freezing-related deaths. The cold is unbearable. The heat is absolutely bearable. So I think that it's perfect time in the legislature for them to step up and reevaluate our grid and the people and the companies that we're putting on our grid, the subsidies that we're providing, to make sure that we have affordable, reliable electricity for every Texan.
I'll ask you something that a lot of my Lubbock listeners are sending to me right now. Lubbock is set to join ERCOT in June of 2021. Talk about timing. Should this be something that citizens in Lubbock and this area, should they be concerned about joining ERCOT right now?
They should absolutely be concerned about what some of the cities that are members of ERCOT are doing, like Austin Energy. They wasted $2 billion on a power plant in East Texas that was burning renewable, aka biomass, wood to provide electricity. They completely shuttered it, spent $2 billion on something that should have lasted 50 years and provided electricity for people in the grid. But nope, they burned that $2 billion. Those dead presidents are now gone. And in San Antonio, the city of San Antonio is trying to virtue signal to the Sierra Club and force CPS Energy, the utility that's controlled by the city, to eliminate the Spruce coal-fired power plant 30 to 40 years before it's reached its end of life. A lot of that electricity is put into the grid, not just in those service areas. So people in Lubbock should be concerned about the virtue signaling leaders of cities like Austin and San Antonio and how they're going to be able to provide reliable electricity to the rest of Texas, because the grids and the electric generation units they control absolutely affect the rest of the state. So we really need some leadership at the state level, and really this virtue signaling has got to stop. It does absolutely nothing to improve the environment. But it does affect reliable electricity and certainly affordability.
Former Representative Jason Isaac, appreciate your time today. Tell folks again how they can find out more about Life Powered and what you guys are doing over at the Texas Public Policy Foundation.
Great. Yeah, check us out on all the socials or at lifepowered.org.
All right, very good. Stay warm, and hopefully the next time we visit with you, it'll be under better circumstances.
Let's hope so. Hope everybody stays warm tonight. 8 o'clock is going to get really interesting because that's when wind almost completely drops off tonight. So save your energy while you can.
All right. Well, we'll be watching it. Thank you very much.